Okay, brilliant. Yeah, guys, what we're going to do today is we're going to get stuck into the performance harmonic stuff. It's very complicated, and so what we want to do, we want to kind of break it down into 3 steps, and first up, it's gonna be about just outlining what they are in as simple terms as we can, and then moving on to why we might want to care about that as a singer, and then lastly, looking at some small things that we've been picking up along the way that might help probably the more advanced singer with some of the nuances of this stuff. But please, if you have any questions along the way, like always, just throw them on the chat section. Okay, so all right, I'll kick this off just because Chris is clearly having massive problems with his computer and his microphone. So what we're going to be looking at here, guys, is the performance and harmonics, and there's no way we can get around this to begin with without talking about the what sound is and acoustics, the source filter theory, and all of that stuff. Basically, anything that makes a sound. Some of you guys will know this. Some of you won't. Anything that makes a sound, sound waves emanate from that. And the crazy thing is actually that our brains, our ears and brains have some serious power and knowledge and control in interpreting that information that we hear. And so with the voice, in fact, what we're actually hearing when somebody sings is something that's been interpreted by our brain, by our ears and then our brain, which is really quite cool. But what we don't know from that is actually that within that sound that was created, there's tons of other information in there that we tend to not be able to break down quite as easily as other technology, let's say. So what we break it down to is 2 main things within the voice, and the first one is the pitch. Our brain can really works out what the pitch is from the sound. So it's like, that's an A, that's a B, it makes sense. The other thing that the brain does is works out the tone, the quality, the energy of that sound, and really gives the sound its distinct sound. And so they're the 2 things that our brains really work out from the sound that's created.
Can anyone hear me?
I can hear you.
Yeah, I'm back in. All right, all right. I'm back in.
So,
right.
Sorry, mate, can you leave it alone? Can you leave it alone? Because I'm getting into this. So we create the sound, and our brain works out in 2 different ways, really, in a basic sense. So the sound waves within the voice are created by the vocal cords, and within that sound, we hear the pitch and we hear the distinct sound quality, and the distinct sound quality is what we call harmonics within the sound created by the voice, and the pitch is what we call the fundamental frequency. So this is just terminology to begin with, and what happens is, as those sound waves leave the vocal cords, that complex, what is called a complex sound because of all of that information within that sound, it travels through what scientists will call a filter. We call it the vocal tract, the throat and the mouth, and that too colors the sound, and helps the different harmonics that either boost them or will attenuate them, and creates a completely different sound altogether. And so this is how the voice works: is that sound waves, vocal cords, through the filter, smashes around, creates a different sound. And so that is what the harmonics are. The formants are the spaces within the throat and the mouth that tend to boost those harmonics.
Just so you guys are aware, one way that we actually use a space to find harmonics and sometimes and boost certain ways is if you do a whistle And you'll notice that the deeper you go with that whistle, I mean, that whistle is resonating in the mouth through the whistling air that comes through the tight gap there. And if you notice when you go for a low pitch, you'll go for much more of an ooh shape. And as you go for a high pitch, you'll notice that tongue moves really far forward right towards the teeth. And that can give you an indication as to how our throats and our mouths can change shape in order to give a sound a different quality. And but we use that more subtly when we're singing. We use those shapes to tune into the harmonics of the sound wave instead of change the pitch. But that leads me on to the passaggio. And the passaggio, or the bridge, or the break, where what most people call it, is where typically the formants are the places in the voice where the harmonics are boosted and given energy. Now, in the lower part of your voice, the throat itself is a better shape to give boosts to the low notes from where the harmonics are positioned. But as we go up in pitch, the harmonics actually go up in pitch as well, and without getting too bogged down with it, it all goes a little bit mental. And our job as singers is trying to create a handover and let these little sound waves that we're giving boost to, let them leave an area of resonance, i.e. the throat, and pass over to another area of resonance, which is the mouth, and let it pass over with such an easy little step so that you don't hear any drop in boost of that harmonic or that sound signal or set of harmonics. And that is what we feel at the bridge. And that's why vowels shape our mouth in a certain way and shape our throat in a certain way. And vowels will have obviously a strong effect on how that sound wave is boosted. So we have vowels as tools in order to bridge the gap of the break and give the impression of a voice or a chest voice that goes all the way up to the top, or just, even tone. But in fact, we are just lining up areas of resonance by changing our throat and mouth shape to hand over harmonics. So people tend to feel very subtle changes at the bridge area. For guys, E, F area. For girls, A, B sort of area. We feel very subtle changes. We feel that harmonic passing over, and we feel the energy in the voice slightly change. However, if you're not handing over well and you're not lining up areas of resonance with harmonics at that point, then your sound wave and the strong harmonics in the sound wave may well end up in an area that isn't resonated. And that's when you might feel very strong changes in register, i.e. flipping, or you might feel that your voice gets really, really tight and tense, or it will work very hard in some way to avoid cracking. And that's why the passaggio is so relevant for us.
Yeah, and I think that's why this applies mainly, if we're talking about singing, it applies mainly to the pop and musical theatre side of the world, the singing world, because that's, you would say, mainly what those singers are chasing, which is that seamless, consistent sound from bottom to top and back again. And there's many genres where that isn't required, and also there's many styles within pop that don't require that. Ellie Goulding, Chris Martin, thank you very much. But for the most part, it's that consistent sound from bottom to top, and this is where the handover of the chamber which is boosting the harmonics really matters, and this is what we're talking about today. I guess the next point is about how much it helps in how much we have to work as a singer as well. Are we jumping into inertance right now, Chris, or?
No, we can jump in. Well, partly if you like. Yeah, we can go into that.
Yeah, I mean, if we line everything up as is most efficient in terms of We hear the correct vowel, which obviously has been created by a certain shape, and that shape is boosting the harmonics and giving us the biggest sound. Then clearly we don't need other muscles. We don't need extra compression at chord level. We don't need the extrinsic muscles to get involved to create sound. And as a matter of fact, the actual intensity of the sound will increase. And that leads on to the self-oscillation of the chords as well. Chris, inertance?
Yes. So Steve's right. You know, when you get power in the sound wave, effort can reduce, and that's one part of it. You get a very strong sound. But what we see is singers who get a very strong sound and have extremely good resonance, but might still put a lot of effort on the vocal cords, as in maybe pressing hard, you know, or in some way overcooking the technique. And when we get that, what we want to do is we want to be safe in the knowledge that as singers, we're getting a pretty good view of Steve's chest there, which is cool.
Sorry about
that. As singers, when we are singing vowels well at pitches that are lined up with harmonics, we get a feedback of energy in our vocal tract. Energy builds, and the way it interacts with the air in our system, in a nutshell, it can adjust pressures in our voice so that we can sing with less phonation threshold pressure. And what that means is you need less pressure from the lungs in order to create a sound, which is, you know, a tick in the box of efficiency. Now, the other side of it is the way it balances pressures above and below the vocal cords means that when the vocal cords wave or vibrate and create sound waves, if we take advantage of this effect called inertance, which is a result of great resonance, the pressures in the voice allow our vocal cords to wave like this, but do what's called self-oscillate, which basically means that they can continue the action of vibration or oscillation, feeding off the energy in the resonance.
Like a flag in the wind.
Like a flag in the wind, right? It just keeps going, it keeps going, it keeps going. And as long as air pressure is still moving towards your voice from your lungs, i.e. provided you're not out of breath, then you can sustain that oscillation or that sound for extremely long periods of time with very little impact, because weight is now off the muscles. The muscles are not oscillating. They are not required to help the oscillation. It's all about the aerodynamics and the resonance. So as singers, we have to think like, when I'm tuned in, I now need to let go of all of that. That's not where power comes from. It comes from tuning up formants and harmonics, lining them up. And that's why we want to take advantage of this effect so much. So for your advanced singers who might be lining up vowels and consonants extremely well, formants and harmonics is an extremely good way of training to take that last little bit of polish that maybe is not ringing with you or is not part of your training right now. So do you want to talk, Steve, about how that relates to maybe style as well?
Well, yeah, I mean, I just want to go back to this conversation we had last night, wasn't it, mate, about the really. Okay, so we know that the vocal tract can line up to a place that supports a consistent sound from bottom to top, and we do that by reinforcing the harmonics on the pitches. When we're traveling up, we're reinforcing the harmonics within the right shapes, and that's how we create an amazing sound. But how does that? We had a conversation last night, didn't we? About, so let's just take the guy for example, and we're up onto, let's say, an F4, and how does that relate in terms of the fundamental frequencies and the harmonics above, and the frequency of the F?
Okay, are you asking me?
Yeah.
Hey, great.
You did a
Well,
great job of explaining it.
oh, thanks. Yeah. So when we speak, we typically speak with our throat shape, or what's called our first foreman, in relatively similar shape and size. So it will boost a fairly set bunch of frequencies that will fit inside that foreman, with the exception of nuances in vowels that slightly change the shape of the throat to give us the sound of the vowels. But it's generally sitting within a range, and that's the problem with hitting the passaggio and not making adjustments from one speaking voice. In that, if we travel up in pitch, the speaking voice at F, or the speaking voice shape in the throat, begins to be unable to continue boosting the necessary harmonics to continue a strong sound, strong contemporary sound, unless we basically drop the larynx a little bit and we let the tongue fall back. And what that kind of does is it gets the throat to let go of this harmonic that is traveling up and up and up. And it's about to travel out of range of the throat. And if we don't let go of it and let go of trying to boost it, we will just yell and yell and yell and yell and yell like that. And that is us closing our throat to keep boosting a one harmonic that we just want to boost constantly. But this is that, and that's what happens to people when they don't make adjustments to the speaking voice. However, when we do make adjustments of our speaking voice and we do prevent that larynx from going up and tracking that harmonic, instead we keep that throat a little bit longer, which allows it to let go of this harmonic that is basically getting out of range of the throat. But we let the tongue fall back and we let the lips close, which creates this better shape, if you like, in the mouth to take on that harmonic and give it a good boost of energy at the passaggio. And that's how experienced singers are able to continue with a connected sound and a strong sound, because at that bridge they don't succumb to dragging the larynx up to boost that sound wave, but they just hand it over to a mouth that is perfectly set up to continue giving it energy. And I think that's where speaking vowels and speaking shapes need to start to be distorted into these shapes that actually boost the sound wave better.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the most important.
Just plug my laptop in.
No worries, man. I think it's one of the most important points, one of the most clear points here, is that it's our reactions as humans and the feelings that we feel as we ascend in pitch, which, let's face it, that's what most songs do. They go up and down, and it's our ability to hold on to sensations that end up screwing up the next note that we sing, which could be within that bridge. And as Chris just said, and if we aren't accustomed to changing our shape and therefore boosting boosting the harmonic in a different part of the voice, then that's when we. Whereas, as a teacher or a singer, this is where isolating and micromanaging certain notes within that bridge. For example, just saying to a singer, okay, we know that F could give you problems, so what we're going to do is create the most beautiful shape within your vocal tract so that your body remembers it over and over and again, so that when you jump up and down in the song, that your body jumps straight to that shape and as quickly as possible, which, let's face it, is what most singing teachers do anyway. And most singers are doing when they're practicing their vocal exercises. So it's, in some ways, there's no real. This isn't new to what teachers and singers are doing in terms of exercising, but the background to it gives us a real clear indication of, all right, so as an advanced singer, no, really, I'd love to see that harmonic being boosted in that part of the voice, or the tongue to drop down, because that's going to make sure that happens on that pitch, or the larynx come down just before we reach that bridge the Passaggio area, because we know that the harmonics will be boosted. As a human being, we're likely to hold on to it, and therefore it's going to screw up as we go higher.
Mm-hmm.
I hope that gives some more kind of relation as to how it can affect us as singers and teachers.
Yeah, and I think embellishing that as well, the thing is, a lot of teachers do teach in ways that kind of help you in a similar way, as in it boosts, it gives you ease, it gives you boost, it gives you all those things. But without the knowledge of formants and harmonics, that 5% of times that those instructions or those tools don't work, one can actually hoover up those problems and not make those mistakes and be able to explain them through science. And that's what I find with my own teaching, is that those little nuggets of information just help me to hoover up those slightly grey areas for students and singers. And again, that's going to, for any teacher who's teaching formants and harmonics, that's why it's going to work for you. There's an example of that, like why a lot of teachers would use the vowel E to drive head voice, to get people into head voice, but there are quite a few occasions where that doesn't work. And that used to drive me nuts as a singer. I'm like, why doesn't E get this person where it should? It's supposed to be a heady vowel. And for most people, it does help them achieve like head voice. And the only reason being is because an E vowel creates such a long throat that it helps you let go of that harmonic that you can often accidentally get stuck tracking and try and yell it out. It helps you to pass that over and get rid of the habit of tracking it. However, what an E vowel also does is that in the middle of the range, it can leave a huge gap in the area which you get resonance for harmonics that relate to a strong sound. So on those occasions, that used to blow my mind. But now we have to look at different vowels to get someone to head voice, and it's not just about E. It's a different understanding now about how the throat and the mouth and the formants line up. We do have some questions. Darcy said, so self-oscillation is when what is balanced? And I think looking at that question, self-oscillation can be sustained if resonance is strong. So if harmonics are landing in the throat and the mouth well, and they get the strong boost, that builds energy in the system. That energy will feed back to the vocal cords on the top side, and that feeding back of energy will help the vocal cords to not only oscillate along with the pressure underneath going like that and the pressure above doing that. It will help them to oscillate, but it can also help you to generate more chord closure during a cycle of the vocal cords, so that the vocal cords cycle can be like this much closed, this much open across a second. Or if you're on a breathy sound, you're going to be like this much closed, this much open. Okay, that's like a breathy sound. This is like a very strong sound. More closed than open. And without any, and that one, by the way, can often be achieved by increasing muscular effort, right, which results in burnout. But the way self-oscillation works and the way that resonance can work is that it can help you achieve a longer closed phase, giving you a chestier sound, a stronger sound, whatever you want to call it. But it does it by use of resonance and aerodynamics, that the formants are lined up with the harmonics. The energy is in the system, and that is just air. It's not muscle, so it requires no effort. And I think that's why when you do line things up, self-oscillation is such a wonderful principle.
Cool, yeah. So the next question, Anthea, please could you give some further specific examples of how you apply this knowledge in the practice of singing and teaching?
That brings us in well, doesn't it, for the last section?
It does. I just want to touch upon very, very quickly what you just said, Chris, about like the E, for example, because this kind of works for that. And this is why I love, because I'm not a scientist. If I'm honest, when I first walked into a Dr. Ingo Tietze webinar workshop, I wanted to run out crying.
And he brought the algebra, didn't he? Oh,
yeah. But and it is a journey in itself, you know, being in the singing world. But like this is why I love the spectrogram. It's I don't love it. That's a lie. It makes it quite. This is why it makes it clear. It makes it clear when it's on paper, even though it's slightly abstract, because it again doesn't relate to noise. It's on paper and it's. But when you said about the Chris, and you said as you're travelling up in pitch, the pitch, as you say, each pitch, when you create an eval, will spike off these frequencies, these harmonics, at different places, at different frequencies, right? And the easiest way to see it is when it's on the spectrogram, and you know, let's say as you're moving on up and you're working into the E or the F for the guy, as soon as we reach that E or the F and we're on an E vowel, the reason why we hear it as a crazy change in sound is because the harmonics have shifted in relation to the shape in our throat, and they are no longer being boosted. And I know it sounds crazy, but it's almost like this, Chris, isn't it? When they're like this all the way up on a B, a C, a D, and then we reach that middle part because of the way the voice changes on those pitches, and the frequencies and the harmonics just kind of shoot apart from each other. And there's such a gap between the harmonics that we cannot shape our mouth and throat in a way that matches those harmonics sufficiently enough to create a big sound.
Oh yeah, I see. Yeah, so yeah, I remember what you're talking about. As we go up, because the harmonics are in relation to each other, and every harmonic is a multiple of the fundamental. So if the fundamental is 10, the next harmonic is 20. But then the next harmonic above 20 is a multiple of the fundamental of the bottom one, the pitch itself. So you add 10 again, and you add 10 again. But obviously, if the new pitch is now actually 20 hertz, that makes this next harmonic 40 hertz. So it's doubled its distance. And the further you go up, the further they go apart. So they become extremely hard to hit.
And so if we don't have a shape in our throat and mouth that are working close to that, to those harmonics, we don't get the sound, and therefore E or U on those pitches do not give a shape that create a formant that matches those harmonics.
Mm-hmm. But on the flip side of that, in terms of teaching techniques as well, what they can do is. Formants and harmonics are usually for people who want to get boom, get like really strong sounds and allow harmonics to pass over between the throat and the mouth with maximum boost. But what we can do is, some people are so hell-bent on maximum boost that we just need to get away from that. So choosing vowels that actually screw that up is a good idea, because it stops people from abusing the process of hanging on to harmonics and giving them too much boost, because it usually comes along with vocal tension and pushing and all kinds of stuff. So we can use like that E or U vowel to basically take energy away, if anything, so it's not abused. And then that's where we can actually start to rediscover the lighter part of the voice, the higher part of the voice, in a much more kind of sort of way, which is what singers usually do well developing. And when they're not so attached to yelling and boosting the wrong harmonics and changing their throat shape in such a weird way, that then we can return to allowing some energy back into the voice and trying to use vowels to connect that at the Passaggio.
I would say, Anthony, that in terms of the teaching stuff, is that I would definitely say, especially if you've got a background in pedagogy of any sense, you'll be using tools that are doing that are either boosting or attenuating harmonics anyway. But this is when you start to think of the voice, the vocal tract as tube. It really can give a different and the subtle changes that can be made with the tongue, the jaw, all that kind of stuff, based on the reaction with the harmonics. It really gives an advanced singer a new experience. You'll be using some brutal exercises and sounds with some less advanced singers, and therefore this probably won't apply quite as much, like the nuances of it all. That said, as a teacher, do we really want to get hung up on the voice of the tube? I mean, this is all just food for thought, really, at this stage for me, and will help as appropriate.
Yeah. Adding to some of those things as well, Anthea, like in the article, we talk about how Pavarotti makes adjustments to his vowels so that they all gravitate towards sounding like one vowel. And he's on one pitch, so he's on a high A, and he's saying like ile, toi, boca. And if you look at the mouth, like on high A, somebody's going to be like ile, toi, boca. Like we've got all these variety of or varieties of mouth shapes that are going to make all the boosting sort of frequencies just move around all over the place, and potentially hit harmonics, miss them, God knows what, probably turn upside down, whatever. And it's going to be a rocky road for a singer that sings like that. However, he's saying like, il toi baga tramonta le stelle, and all of his vowels are like going towards and they're all sounding a bit like And what that does, that creates a bit of consistency in the shape of the chambers of the throat and the mouth. It kind of stops them from moving around so much, so that you can maintain the boost on the harmonics that you want pitch, and that gives you an opportunity to balance well and take advantage of self-oscillation, ease in register, and maximum power. Maybe that sounds more too operatic, but still contemporary singers do it. I've personally felt that at times I've felt like a tongue shape like I, and blending everything like it's like I, so I end up sounding a bit South African if I'm speaking. But on some higher ranges for me, that's been quite effective for my personal setup. So you may find with students that thinking of certain vowels and trying to get them to blend their vowels into that shape, and it will be a weird sensation. They're like, what make R sound like air? And it's like, you'll get it. If you think about that vowel shape and try and make it fit, then with experimentation, they're going to be able to find how to be able to do that. But over time, as the vocal situation improves or doesn't, then we might find that different vowel shapes, blending with different vowel shapes, might be relevant at different times of our vocal development. And certainly now I feel like I'm more on than I am on I when I'm singing. So yeah, that's another way to teach this technique in a way. But we knew it was such a huge subject, didn't we, Steve? That
Yeah.
We knew it was going to be hard to have like very specific take-home things to do. But certainly blending vowels into one vowel at the Passaggio area will be certainly a very strong technique for some people, and will have a lot of effect, especially if you are advanced.
And it just gives back up to the justification for why singing is so hard. Different pitches, different people doing different things. It gives real understanding as to why we have to work at this. But we really ought to look to wrap this up.
We know we've got questions, by the way, but we're running over schedule, and everything's going. We're being told off, all that kind of stuff. So, but Sarah, go and get yourself, if you can stomach it, the Vocology book, or look up some Ingo Tietze books. The vocology book has some really horribly hard stuff in it. However, it also has some very useful practical chapters in it towards the end that can teach you a bit more about performance and harmonics and give you actual exercises in which to experience things like lung pressure, and all that. And Darcy, we could probably take that question offline if you like, and talk about that a bit more. We don't mind doing that. But as always, get in contact with us via. You can contact Icing. You can contact us at thenakedvocalist.com. Facebook.com/TNV questions, or Twitter at TNV questions. Quite happy to talk to you guys beyond this point. Anything you want to add to, Steve?
What we're covering in the next issue of Icing?
I didn't. Let you keep talking, and I will.
What I will say though is our next release of our podcast on iTunes, just the Naked Vocalist. Search it. You might get this weird kind of Satan guy pop up on your search, but you'll see the difference between us and him. The Naked Vocalist. We are actually talking to John Henney, who talks a lot about the vowel and vowel tuning, which supports this. I think we actually do get onto the performance and harmonic topic a little bit as well. So have a listen to that. If you haven't already listened to the Dr. Ingo Tietze podcast, which I think was episode 20, top of my head, go and check that out on iTunes. But Chris, what's going on Icing next issue?
We're talking about reducing vocal strain, which, funny enough, will facilitate this subject, because if you have vocal strain, you can't take advantage of self-oscillation as much as you could if you were able to, relax out all the tensions in the voice and not be shrouded in it. So I think it's going to be very helpful. But again, guys, if you're not on Icing magazine, it's just full of this stuff. I think you guys got to just get on it, and please join us on the podcast as well. It's free, it's brilliant, and we love just helping people out.
Anthea or anybody else, just email whatever the email is for Icing on this, so we can hook up after this and talk about everything. If we want to go into some more depth.
Or what I would suggest, actually, so it's easier for us, is to go to our Facebook page and post something on there, Darcy, and then we can actually start to all join in on that conversation and be a part of it.
Cool.
Yes, and go to icingmag.com for all your icing needs. Thanks.
Wow.
Sorry about the ridiculously stupid start.
That's all right.
And that's it, really.
Thanks for everyone for coming in and joining us, because otherwise we're just going to waffle in onto ourselves, and it's nice to have people. It's nice to have friends.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Thanks, people. Get in contact. Thanks. Speak soon.
Love you.